rejuvenation of Laurie's Dollhouse continues, of course. This episode is a little bit different in that there is some additional historical significance on this particular project. And here we're going to focus on these three gems here. So this portico, this space is pretty big, pretty awesome. And those columns need just a little bit of attention. Now the columns reportedly came from the Parkersburg National Bank. And that bank building was torn down in the 1950s when the portico on the Dollhouse was added, and somehow the owner acquired these columns. But over time, they have taken a beating, and usually the sands of time is what does it, but I'm going to say the water of time. So here we're going to take a quick look at the structure and the current condition of the columns. And it doesn't take long to see why we need to take some action here. In fact, they've become structurally unstable, and you can tell that by, well, looking at them, but also you can see that there are some additional metal support posts that are actually holding the portico up so that the weight is not resting on the old columns. We use some jacks, which you'll see in a minute, and it is just, it's pretty stout. So we want it to be safe, and we want it to be well supported. And you can see here the structure really is beautiful. It's a great space, and it's actually really big. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and prepare to lift the structure, and we only need to lift it about 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch. We don't have to lift it very much. And surprisingly, it was relatively level. It was off of level by about 1/2 an inch. So we're going to go ahead and address that. I don't know why I was surprised at how easily the columns actually came out. And more specifically, the tops of the columns, which are called the capitals. And you can see here, this is just coming out by hand. And there are lots of things that have lived in these columns in the past, and there are things that are living in there now. And as mentioned, these columns came down pretty easily. Once you take the weight off of them, they really just fell kind of into my lap. And that was my trusty brother-in-law, Michael, giving me a hand there. As we look at the base of the columns, you can see that there are lots of things actually living in there that you don't want living in or on your house for sure. But lots of insects, lots of little critters, and just another look at the damage. Here are the new columns, and they are a fiberglass resin, and these are actually infused with marble dust to give them strength, and they're going to hold up to 37,000 pounds each, so they're pretty significant, in addition to looking pretty spectacular. And here you can see we have the first column up, and I didn't film that. I figured it was kind of boring. It was just the opposite of taking the old one down. And here we see a side-by-side, the original center column in the foreground, and then the newer column in the background. As I took the center column off, I did discover quite a bit of structural damage, and I'm going to show you a little bit more on that in just a minute. So here we're going to take all the old trim boards and all the old fascia boards off so that we have access to the structure itself. As mentioned, we did run into some structural issues that we're going to have to correct. And here I'm holding up the center of the portico structure with a bottle jack and a 4x4, and just off of screen to the left I have another one holding up the other corner, and just to give it some stability but also create that space where we can do our work and then insert the new column. And you can see I'm quickly making a mess with all of the rotted material falling off of the structure. And here's a closer look at the rot, the damage. These are 3 2x12s that are nailed together, so it's really heavy, really stout, and they are rotted from the bottom, which is an indication of the top of the column allowing water to get in there. So we're going to have to rebuild this part. So I'm going to sister up 3 2x10s. So I'm going to glue them and clamp them and nail them all together. So in this one area of the portico, there will actually be the 3 original 2x12s with the bottoms of them rotted out, and then 3 new pieces of lumber that ties that whole system together and restores the structural stability to the center of the portico. And here's the completed work with all 3 of the new pieces of lumber glued and nailed into place, and once again attached to the original members, which you can see there clearly are rotted out on the bottom. So I feel like we've restored the original strength to the center of the portico. And now we're going to create a new piece for the center column to anchor to. I did have to buy a new table saw, so that took about 30 minutes to assemble that, and works like a charm. So we're going to take this giant thick piece of lumber. We're going to plane it down. So after about 94,000 passes through the planer, we're going to get that down to the size that we need that matches what is there already. And here we have the dimension that we need. And with the price of lumber these days, this is about a $4 pile of shavings. Too bad I don't have a hamster. So that piece is just going to fit right up in there. Once again, I'm going to glue that and tack that into place. And that's where that new center column will go. Just like this. And once again, you can see the tremendous mess I made just pulling all that old material out. So here we have all 3 columns installed. They're not anchored yet. I'm going to show you that process in just a few minutes. But we will go ahead and rebuild this, and we'll put some new fascia up here. It's nice and clean and smooth. So you can watch me work here just for a minute. I don't actually work that fast, but we'll speed it up just to keep your interest. And here's a quick look with the front of the portico being complete, and then I need to address the side. If you're anything like me, a project can actually take a long time. That's because I don't have time to dedicate all of my time to that particular project. So here I'm pulling off just to do a little bit of yard work, and then we'll get right back at it. So here's the side of the portico, or the portion facing the street, and what you see is 70-year-old plywood, and there's some trim. And my original plan was to scrape all that, paint it, and call it good, but I thought in the end it would look like 70-year-old plywood that I scraped and painted, and I didn't want that. We're making everything else so nice and clean. I wanted to make this nice and smooth and clean as well. So I did skin it with 1/4-inch plywood, sanded plywood, to give it just a real nice fresh look. And here you can compare the two side by side. And at the base of that plywood, I'm going to build up some molding. I'll show you kind of a profile shot here in a minute. But lots of brad nails and caulking, and here I am puttying seams so that there's a nice seamless look to it. Basically trying to not only make it pretty, but make it weatherproof, because that was the downfall of the original issue with the columns, is the weather just had its way with it. So water is always enemy number 1 to all homes. Water always wins, so you want to keep that out. So here I'm taking some extra precautions, trying to keep that water out for the future. And here's kind of a profile shot of the molding, how I built that out. And this is pre-caulk, so I'm going to caulk all those joints so it's nice and smooth and pretty. And then of course get to painting, and here we go. So once again, only thing more boring than watching paint dry is actually watching somebody paint. So I'm going to speed this up for you, but kind of give you a sense for the project and how it developed and how it moves along. And I'm just going to add some L brackets here in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. And these are just designed to give them kind of some lateral stability. And once again, they're going to be held in place by actually the weight of the portico itself. So that's a roto hammer. I'm going to drill into the concrete and drive a concrete anchor, which you'll see. I'm going to attach the anchor to the footer, and then I will attach that L bracket to the column itself. I'm going to use a masonry bit and then some masonry screws just to hold that L bracket in place. And that's going to give me some peace of mind that those columns are not going to slide around or want to go anywhere if that portico were to uplift in a storm or something like that. So basically I'm going to repeat that process 11 more times. And here's some more painting. Once again, super boring watching people paint. So here I've got the columns anchored, and I'm starting to paint the columns themselves. The portico has been all painted, and you can see how nice and fresh and white that looks. And you can see how smooth it turned out on the sides there, or the front, the side facing the street. And each of these columns will actually take 4 coats of paint. So here we are with a finished product. Thought that was a nice guy. I thought I'd include that. But here is the portico, and it is done. And you might notice the old columns lying there to the left. I got to figure out what to do with those. But you can see it's nice and fresh and clean, and more importantly, it is structurally sound and stable. And we had to set each of those columns with a laser to ensure that they were perfectly vertical. But once again, I think it turned out nice. Here you can see that nice smooth kind of fascia area. And here's the corner column with, once again, 4 coats of paint, nice and bright and white. All seams are caulked. Shouldn't have to worry about this for a while. And here's a quick side-by-side. It's not perfectly the same angle, but it's pretty close. You can see looking down that front fascia how it turned out. Once again, not only is it beautiful, it's going to be functional and it's going to be safe. So don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and you'll want to hit the bell so that you're notified of future content. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.